So we're going to mention real quick what we thought of each system, and we're going to add what Retro Gamer magazine thinks of the game on some of these systems as well.
While the Amiga version is nowhere near as bad as the Commodore 64 port, the visuals look better but the gameplay is still very slow. You don't get any sense of speed even with the Nitro, and as such is a waste of a promising license.
Ah yes, the Amiga. A PC I owned and enjoyed. And also had a plethora of games due to the fact that I could swap discs with friends at school, there was little to no copyright protection, and I could also photocopy manuals in the school library.
The Game Gear and the Master System were exactly the same. The game got off to a good start with a colourful menu screen that mimics the start-up screen at the arcade. But it's afterwards the promise of the game drops dramatically and we're given a rad racer rip-off, with flat, skinny, snaking tracks making the game feel twitchy and annoying.
I had a Master System back in the day too, and it was a great system to play. Ironically, it's funny to hear how it failed in America, considering that its sales figures here in Australia were on par to the NES.
I enjoyed the Game Gear, but honestly the Lynx was the console for me. It wasn't quite as heavy as the Game Gear. You could prop it up between your legs and not get sore arms within like 2 minutes. I also liked the novelty of the left and right-handed controls on the Lynx. It was a far superior machine if you ask me.
This port may be sorely lacking the glorious hues of the arcade and Amstrad CPC ports, but it's still a silky smooth conversion. There just isn't anything you could do to this game to make it better considering the limitations of the machine. The gameplay is so on the money it's scary, including an animated ending summing up perfectly the amount of effort and attention to detail that comes from this port.
I don't think any of us had a Specky, am I right, guys? Nah. Yet, to be honest with you, it was mentioned so often and so passionately in mags like Retro Gamer that I honestly feel like we actually owned one.
What we have here is simply the best arcade port ever released for the Amstrad, and shows up perfectly why Sugar's machine could do arcade ports in all its glory. While many people argue that it's not as smooth as the Spectrum port, in all honesty we'll probably struggle to notice any real difference. This is, in our opinion, the greatest 8-bit conversion of Chase HQ.
Now this is another system that really didn't make much of a dent here in the land of Oz, although my first computer was the Amstrad 1512. Pretty good computer for its time actually, but always infected with the stone virus. But we're talking about the 8-bit computers, and I mean, if we're going to talk about 8-bit computers, here in Australia the only one that really made a name for itself was the Commodore 64.
Oh dear, it's like Ocean put all colour, power and resources into making a pretty game border and then suddenly realised it had to use the minimal 1K of memory and the 3 remaining colours to make it into an actual computer game. What you have is the Commodore 64 port of Chase HQ. Drive a blocky and ridiculously sluggish Porsche through a bland monochrome world. It's slow, looks like a crusty white dog turd and plays like one too.
And speaking of the Commodore 64, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about the Commodore is those tapes, the games on the tapes.
Oh God.
And those loading screens with all the colours, the trippy colours and everything. You remember the ones? Man, you know, by the time the thing would load, you could have like made your breakfast, walked the dog, gone to school, you come back from school and by the time you get back, the game's loaded.
And Mum would have had dinner ready by then too.
Exactly.
Other releases that we found while we were researching these systems was on the FM Towns PC.
The Nintendo Entertainment System.
I barely ever played this console. I occasionally picked it up, but not really past Mario, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Oh, and Duck Hunt. Yeah, Duck Hunt was definitely my favourite game on this console. The Game Boy? I didn't get a Game Boy until 1992, long after its release. But it got to the point where all my friends had one, so I really didn't have a choice anymore.
NEC, PCFX, or TurboGrafx, whatever you want to call it.
This console definitely felt ahead of its time.
I remember a friend's older brother was so protective over his that he wouldn't let anyone play it, as it was an import from Hong Kong and rarely seen in these parts of the world.
The PS2.
Home of the best racing game ever, in my opinion. I got this console solely for Gran Turismo 4, and I think it was actually the only game I ever bought for it. I can still find myself picking it up just to do a B license and a couple of races, and a month later I'm pondering doing those 24-hour races. I think I've finished it about 4 times now.
The Mega Drive?
Chase HQ was released in Japan as Super HQ on the Sega Mega Drive and Chase HQ 2 on the American Sega Genesis, with some minor changes including alternative player vehicles.
The Sharp X68000. The X68000, often referred to as the X68K, was a home computer released only in Japan by the Sharp Corporation. The first model was released in 1987 with a 10 MHz Motorola 68000 CPU.
Mobile phones.
Ring, ring.
Hello. Mobile phones. Hello. Mobile phones. Hello. Mobile phones.
Hello,
Mobile phones. Hello.
So that's all we've really got to say about Chase HQ. Now you're probably wondering what we're doing in a car. Well, for once we're not looking for a Sega Rally 2 machine, but instead we're on to our special private release party of Iron Fist, the prequel of Fisting Fighters. You're going to love it, so stay tuned on channel Sikustiga to check it out. Thank you. Thank you for sticking with us again, and see you next time, and all that jazz.
Please subscribe. We're really, really lonely.
I know what jazz.
I can't handle him anymore.
And all that jazz. Jazz hands.
Hey, keep your jazz hands where I can see them.
Peace out. Later all.
Please step out of the vehicle. Get out of the car, sir.
Get out of the car.